Valérie Leblanc. On August 23, 2011, an 18-year-old student walked into the woods behind her college on the very first day of the fall semester. It was supposed to be the start of a new chapter. She never walked out. Her body was found less than 3 hours later, burned and beaten just meters from campus. So what happened in those woods? And why did it take 14 years to find the person responsible? Valérie Leblanc was a first-year student at Cégep de l'Outaouais on the Gabriel Roy campus in the Hull sector of Gatineau, Quebec. She dreamed of joining the RCMP's tactical unit, inspired by her grandfather, a former Gatineau police officer. Her mother is Julie Charon. August 23rd was supposed to be the beginning of everything for Valérie. It was the very first day of the fall semester. That afternoon, Valérie was last seen alive at approximately 1 in the afternoon, entering a wooded area behind the campus with a friend. That friend departed about 30 minutes later. At roughly 3:55 in the afternoon, 2 students smoking on a nearby bike path smelled smoke and discovered her body. One of them later recalled, "She was lying on her front. Her legs were broken. At the time, we didn't believe it was real." Valérie's body had been badly beaten, burned, and partially unclothed. The coroner's report, issued 13 months later, determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. It was Gatineau's first homicide of 2011. How does someone walk into the woods behind their own school in broad daylight and never come back? A parallel investigation was opened after evidence suggested people who first encountered the body may have tampered with it. 4 teenagers were looked into, but the Crown ultimately filed no charges against any of them. Whether the tampering was an act of curiosity, panic, or something more deliberate was never established. In October 2011, police released a composite sketch of a person of interest, described as a white, French-speaking male in his 20s, roughly 6 feet tall with a pot belly, wearing a black nylon jacket and walking a black bicycle. A $10,000 reward was offered by Sun Youth. Over the years, investigators received more than 2,300 tips. In 2013, an anonymous caller to a TVA television show claimed the person responsible had taken his own life in Gatineau Park a month after the incident. Police dismissed the claim as unfounded. Valérie's ex-boyfriend was cleared early on. For 14 years, the case sat cold. 2,300 tips and not a single charge. Was the truth ever going to come out? Then, on September 30th, 2025, 14 years after the incident, Gatineau police arrested Stéphane Rivard, 51, a Gatineau resident, and charged him with first-degree taking of life. Police credited new, investigative techniques and technological advances. Rivard had never been publicly named as a suspect in the 14 years since the incident. A January 2026 Radio-Canada report strongly suggests forensic genetic genealogy was the breakthrough. The same technology that has been cracking cold cases across North America by tracing DNA through family trees submitted to public databases. On February 17, 2026, the Crown filed a direct indictment, bypassing the preliminary inquiry to move the case faster. Prosecutor Antoine Desaulniers stated, "The family and the community are waiting for answers. Rivard remains detained and has not entered a plea. The case is proceeding to Superior Court in Gatineau, with the assises term opening March 19, 2026. If convicted, he faces mandatory life imprisonment with no parole eligibility for 25 years. For Valérie's mother, Julie Charon, the wait has been 14 years of unanswered questions. The trial may finally provide some of those answers. 14 years of silence, broken by science. But the next case involves an entire family, refugees who had already survived so much, only to meet a fate no one in Regina could explain. H2 family triple homicide. On August 6, 2010, a property manager in Regina, Saskatchewan, investigated a foul smell coming from a townhouse on Oakview Drive in the Uplands neighborhood. What he found inside would be described as the worst incident of multiple homicides in the city's entire history. An entire family was gone, all three of them, in a home that should have been the safest place they had ever known. So, who were they? And why has no one ever been charged? Gray Nay H2, 31, his wife Mama, 28, who was reportedly expecting their second child, and their son 7 June H2 were an ethnic Karen family from Myanmar. The Karen are one of the most persecuted ethnic groups in Southeast Asia, and the H2 family had spent years in a Thai border camp before being accepted by Canada in 2007 to 2008. They settled in Regina's Uplands neighborhood at 323 Oakview Drive. Gray worked at Crown Shred and recycling. They attended New Friends in Christchurch, where their minister recalled them saying Canada was a good country and free country, and they were happy. They had survived displacement, years in a refugee camp, and the long process of resettlement. They believed the worst was behind them. Then Police Chief Troy Hagan called the scene the worst incident of multiple homicides in Regina in our history. Full details of how the family was harmed were never publicly disclosed, but the scene was described as particularly disturbing. A neighbor reported hearing sounds resembling gunshots, though police later confirmed no firearm was involved. Whatever happened inside that townhouse was carried out without a single gunshot, which only deepened the mystery surrounding the method and the motive. At peak intensity, 25 officers worked the case full-time. The RCMP, FBI, and other agencies assisted. More than 200 people were interviewed, many requiring Karen language. Interpreters flown in from across Canada and the United States. The Karen community in Regina is small and tight-knit, and many members were initially reluctant to speak with investigators, unfamiliar with how the Canadian justice system works. Police distributed questionnaires to neighbors, asking directly whether they had any involvement. Meetings were held with the Karen community to explain the legal process and build trust. Despite the scale of the investigation, no one was ever charged. By 2013, police acknowledged they had arrested individuals, but released them without charges. The motive has never been confirmed. Speculation has ranged from a targeted personal act to a possible hate-motivated incident against refugee newcomers, but nothing has been substantiated. What makes this case so haunting is how completely it resists explanation. There was no forced entry. There were no witnesses who came forward, and the family had no known enemies. In May 2014, the Regina Board of Police Commissioners authorized a $50,000 reward. In August 2015, the case was reassigned to the Cold Case Unit. The reward has been renewed every single year since it was first posted. In December 2025, police disclosed that evidence had been sent to Ottawa for testing with new DNA analysis technology. A new cold case coordinator was reviewing the file. Police Chief Laura Lee Davies stated, "We still believe there are people in the community who have answers." 15 years later, the case remains unsolved. The $50,000 reward is still active. Gray, Mama, and 7 June came to Canada looking for safety. Someone in Regina knows what happened inside that townhouse. The police are certain of it. But so far, that person has chosen to stay silent. A family who escaped one of the most dangerous places on earth, only to find danger waiting in the place they thought was safe. But this next case would take even longer to reach a courtroom, and it started with a party that 200 people attended. Misha Pavlik. On the May-long weekend of 2006, roughly 200 people gathered at Kinukimal Campground, about 45 kilometers northwest of Regina, for the annual Miller High School graduation camping party. It was supposed to be a celebration. Music, bonfires, old friends catching up before they scattered for summer. But by the end of the night, a 19-year-old named Misha Pavlik was gone. Nearly 200 people were there. Nobody saw the moment it happened. So how do you solve a case with 200 potential witnesses and not a single one who saw the truth? Misha Pavlik was 19 years old, from Regina, and had attended Miller High School. His father, Lorne, described him as good at sports and a wannabe bass player with dreams of returning to school. His mother ran a daycare, and Misha would stop at the fence to high-five every single child on his way past. Friends remembered him as magnetic, the kind of person who lit up a room the moment he walked in. People loved Misha. That night, an uninvited group arrived at the campground that included Misha's ex-girlfriend and her new boyfriend, Andrew Perkins. The mood shifted immediately. Tensions rose. Misha smashed a beer bottle over Perkins's head, triggering a chaotic brawl. Misha was knocked down and kicked by a group. During a second confrontation, he sustained a single fatal wound, straight through the heart, along with gashes to his head. No witness saw the actual moment of the stabbing. In a crowd of 200 people, on an open campground, not one person could say they saw the blade. A friend performed CPR while Misha's ex-girlfriend held his hand. His father was able to tell his son he loved him over the phone. Misha passed before paramedics arrived. RCMP interviewed approximately 170 people. In 2007, Scott Nelson pleaded guilty to aggravated assault for stabbing another partygoer, Derek Enns, the same night and served 3 years. So, someone at that party was willing to use a blade, and did. But no one was charged with what happened to Misha. The case stalled for over a decade. The breakthrough came in 2019 when Saskatchewan RCMP launched Who Killed Misha Pavlik?, the first ever podcast created by the RCMP. It generated 19 anonymous tips and brought forward at least one key trial witness. It was the first time a Canadian law enforcement agency had used a podcast as an investigative tool. And it worked. In 2021, RCMP conducted an underwater evidence search at the Regina Beach Pier. On June 27, 2023, a man who had been a minor at the time of the incident was charged with second degree. His name is protected under Canada's Youth Criminal Justice Act. The trial began October 20, 2025, at Regina Court of King's Bench. 19 years after that campground party, the case was finally in front of a jury, the Crown, called 34 witnesses over roughly 4 weeks. Scott Nelson testified that the accused bragged about stabbing someone that night, saying, "I got him." Another witness described the accused passing her a beer bottle with blood on it, appearing excited. The defense argued that no one saw the accused deliver the wound, but the Crown presented a pattern of behavior and statements that pointed directly at him. On November 14, 2025, after approximately 20 hours of deliberation over 3 days, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of second degree. The courtroom fell silent. Lorne Pavlik told reporters that 6,246 days had passed between his son's passing and the charge. Sentencing was postponed to late March 2026. The Crown is seeking an adult sentence, which would mean life with parole eligibility after 10 to 25 years. A youth sentence maximum would be 7 years, a gap that has drawn significant public attention. A Gladue report is being explored. The accused remains in custody. A memorial mural of Misha, painted by artist Jade Gooden, stands on the side of Brandy's corner store in Regina's Cathedral neighborhood. It took 17 years, a podcast, and one witness who finally decided to speak. Misha's father counted every single day. It took a podcast to break the silence around that campground. But the next case had no witnesses at all. Just a blood-soaked home, an abandoned car, and a nurse who vanished in the night. On the morning of August 30th, 2010, police in Orangeville, Ontario, responded to a report of an abandoned vehicle behind a business near the town hall. Both front doors and the trunk were wide open. There were blood smears on the rear bumper. The car belonged to a 42-year-old pediatric nurse who should have been at work that morning. She was nowhere to be found. Her home, just a short drive away, was covered in blood. So where was Sonia Varashin? And who had taken her from her own home? Sonia Varashin was a pediatric nurse who had worked at South Lake Regional Health Centre in Newmarket, Ontario. She had previously cared for young patients in the burn unit and cancer ward of a Toronto Children's Hospital and saved every card and drawing her patients gave her. She was the kind of person who kept those things forever. Originally from Bolton, Ontario, she lived in a townhome on Spring Street in Orangeville, about 80 kilometers northwest of Toronto. She had just accepted a bilingual position at a pharmaceutical company in Mississauga, a new chapter she had been preparing for by studying French in her spare time. She was the daughter of Italian immigrant father Attilio and French-Canadian mother Michelle. On Sunday, August 29th, Sonia visited her parents in Bolton for lunch, then returned home to study French for her new job. That evening, she left her mother a voicemail about baking a cake. It was the last time her family heard from her. The next morning, she failed to show up for work. Around 10 in the morning, her white Toyota Corolla was found abandoned behind a business near Town Hall. Both front doors and trunk open. Blood smears on the rear bumper. At her townhome, officers found large amounts of blood splattered throughout and blood on the front steps. But no sign of forced entry and no sign of Sonia. A neighbor recalled hearing yelling and tires screeching overnight. There was no indication that anyone had broken in, which meant whoever entered may have been let in or may have had access. Investigators believe Sonia was harmed inside her home. Her body wrapped in bedding, a beige-fitted sheet and matching comforter, both missing from the residence, then placed in the trunk of her own Toyota Corolla and driven away. The car was abandoned behind a business in the center of town, with both doors and the trunk left open, as if the person responsible had left in a hurry. Surveillance footage captured two unidentified people in a gazebo near the abandoned car at approximately 6 in the morning on August 30th. On September 5th, a man walking his dog on Beach Grove Side Road in Caledon found her remains in a wooded area, still wrapped in bedding from her home, roughly 13 kilometers east of Orangeville. The cause of her passing has never been publicly disclosed, held back as evidence only the person responsible would know. Whoever did this had enough time and composure to wrap her body, load it into her own vehicle, drive it 13 kilometers, leave it in the woods, and then abandon the car back in town. That is not the behavior of someone acting on impulse. The OPP partnered with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit and RCMP behavioral scientists for an intensive 3-day criminal profiling summit in December 2010. The profile described someone who engaged in high-risk behaviors, left the scene covered in significant blood, was familiar with Orangeville, and likely knew Sonia, though she may not have known him. The amount of blood at the townhome suggested whoever was responsible would have been visibly covered when they left, which meant someone may have seen them that night. A partial male DNA profile was developed, and police are confident it belongs to the person responsible. A bloody footprint at the scene where her remains were found was traced to a Dakota or Wind River brand boot, size 10 to 12, sold exclusively at a Mark's Work warehouse over 700 men were asked for voluntary DNA samples beginning May 2011, a controversial canvass that drew objections from the Canadian Civil Liberties Association. More than 1,500 tips have been received over the years. Sonia's boyfriend, Ian, a married man, was investigated and cleared. Police also explored her activity on the dating site Plenty of Fish, searching for anyone who might have made contact with her through the platform. Despite all of this, the partial DNA profile has never been matched. The case remains unsolved. A $50,000 reward is still active. The OPP continues to pursue new DNA technology, hoping that the partial profile sitting in their files will finally find its match. Detective Inspector Sean Glassford stated in 2025, "We're looking to talk to somebody who knows something about what happened to Sonia." 15 years later, that somebody has still not come forward. 15 years, 700 DNA samples, and still no answer. But the next case is perhaps the most baffling of all, because two best friends were taken in a single moment for a reason no one has ever been able to explain. Oliver Martin and Dylan Ellis. On the night of June 12th into the early morning of June 13th, 2008, two best friends left a condo in downtown Toronto after watching the NBA Finals. They drove away in a black Range Rover. Then they got a phone call. A friend had left his keys behind. They turned around to drop them off. It should have taken 5 minutes. And in doing so, they drove straight into something no one has ever been able to explain. What could have possibly happened in those few missing minutes? Oliver Martin, 25, was a Concordia University graduate working in Toronto's financial district who had just passed his CPA exam. He had overcome anxiety and dyslexia to earn his degree, pushing through obstacles that would have stopped most people, and trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and kickboxing. Dylan Ellis, 26, was a photographer and college graduate. The two had been inseparable since grade 6 at Brown School in Toronto's Rosedale neighborhood, growing up skateboarding, playing baseball, and collaborating on a magazine project. Friends always referred to them simply as Dylan and Oliver. They were the kind of friends who never needed a reason to be together. That night, they watched Game 4 of the NBA Finals at a friend's condo at 798 Richmond Street West. After the game, they left in Ellis's black Range Rover, Ellis driving, Martin in the passenger seat, Martin's girlfriend in the back. A friend, Andrew Gilchrist, called to say they still had his keys. Dylan said, "No problem, I'll drive them back." They returned and stopped in the road, engine running, windows down. A male figure approached the driver's side. Ellis turned his head and said something like, "How's it going?" The figure immediately opened fire, hitting Ellis, then repositioned to the front driver's side corner and fired through the windshield on a diagonal, striking Martin in the chest. Forensic analysis showed the shooter was standing 18 to 24 inches from the vehicle. At that distance, you can see the color of someone's eyes. This was not a random act from across the street. Martin's girlfriend, unharmed in the back seat, called 911 at 12:08 in the morning. Both men were rushed to St. Michael's Hospital, but were pronounced deceased shortly after arrival. She had taken a cell phone photo of them laughing in the front seats just 3 minutes before it happened. That photograph would later become central to the public appeal for information. Police initially theorized a carjacking or mistaken identity, but the extreme proximity of the shooter, close enough to see the occupants clearly, ruled out misidentification. Lead investigator Detective Sergeant Gary Giroux called the absence of motive the most challenging aspect, saying, "I have not been able to find another case that is similar to this one with regard to a lack of motive." Investigators exhaustively looked into both men's lives and found absolutely no evidence of criminal activity enemies, or high-risk behavior. These were not men who had made enemies. Oliver had just passed his CPA exam. Dylan was building a photography career. Giroux theorized a precipitating event, something hugely insignificant to most people, occurred between the time they initially left and when they returned. Something happened in those few minutes on the road, something small enough that Dylan and Oliver may not have even noticed it, but significant enough to someone else that it cost them their lives. A young male was seen fleeing on a mountain bike. His role was never determined. A $50,000 reward was posted. Police launched a media blitz in June 2009, displaying photos of Dylan and Oliver on TTC subway screens across the city, hoping someone riding to work or school would recognize something, remember something, and finally pick up the phone. Then came a haunting detail that no one could have predicted. Andrew Gilchrist, the friend whose keys prompted the fatal return trip, was found dead in his apartment on June 13, 2014, exactly 6 years to the day, from an apparent overdose. Giroux called the date coincidence really quite bizarre. Whether Gilchrist's passing was connected to the weight of what happened that night or purely coincidental, no one has ever determined. But the timing was impossible to ignore. The case remains unsolved. No arrests, no suspects, no established motive. As of 2018, Detective Sergeant Mary Verna confirmed no progress had been made. The case remains listed on the Toronto Police Service homicide page. The photograph Martin's girlfriend took of them laughing in the front seats 3 minutes before they were taken remains the last image of Dylan and Oliver together. Two best friends who did a favor for a friend and never made it home. Taken for no reason anyone has ever been able to name. No motive, no suspect, no explanation. Nearly 18 years and counting. If you've made it this far and enjoyed deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. But the next case sat cold for almost as long, until a DNA match with odds of 1 in 2.4 trillion finally broke the silence. Crystal Saunders. On the morning of April 19, 2007, an off-duty RCMP officer checking trap lines near St. Ambroise, Manitoba, roughly 75 to 100 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg, found the body of a young woman in a water-filled ditch. She was unclothed. He had canoed that same ditch just the day before and seen nothing, which placed the dump overnight. The isolation of the location was striking. St. Ambroise is a small remote community. Whoever left her there knew the area, or at least knew enough to find a place where no one would be looking. So who was she? And why would it take 17 years to find the person responsible? Crystal Shannon Saunders was 24 years old, a Métis woman born at Misericordia Hospital in Winnipeg. She attended Strathcona School and St. John's High School and was described by family as outgoing, smart, and beautiful. She was a mother and was well liked by many. At the time of her passing, Crystal was struggling with addiction and was being exploited. Her mother, Sandra, later said, "Crystal was not born a prostitute. She was not born a drug addict. She was somebody. She was a beautiful little girl with big dreams. She just got lost and she just couldn't come back." The evening before her body was found, on April 18th, an on-duty Winnipeg police officer had seen Crystal getting into a red vehicle at the corner of Sargent Avenue and Sherbrooke Street in Winnipeg's West End. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. She had been strangled. Unknown male DNA was recovered from her neck, but the initial sample was deemed insufficient for the National DNA Databank. Without enough genetic material to run a proper comparison, the most promising lead in the case was essentially useless. The case went cold. It sat for years with no movement. It was eventually assigned to Project Devote, Manitoba RCMP's task force dedicated to missing and harmed Indigenous women and exploited persons. Crystal's case was one of dozens on the task force's list, each one representing a life that the system had failed to protect. Her mother, Sandra, never stopped calling. She phoned RCMP 3 times a week, every single week, for years. She refused to let the file gather dust. She refused to let Crystal become just a number. In 2014, advances in DNA technology allowed the sample from Crystal's neck to finally meet the databank threshold. And it hit. The DNA was matched to Kevin Charles Quo, with odds of 1 in 2.4 trillion. Quo, originally from Winnipeg, was in the system due to a British Columbia investigation into serious offenses against women. In 2015, he had been sentenced to 5 years for aggravated assaults involving prolonged choking, attacks on multiple women that investigators noted bore similarities to the manner of Crystal's passing. But a DNA match alone was not enough to guarantee a conviction. Investigators needed more. Between 2023 and 2024, at least 18 RCMP officers spent more than 7 months on an elaborate Mr. Big Sting operation in Vancouver. They befriended Quo at his favorite sports pub, gradually drawing him into staged criminal activities to build trust and elicit information. The operation required months of daily contact, fabricated scenarios, and careful psychological maneuvering. It was one of the most resource-intensive undercover operations in recent Manitoba RCMP history. The Mr. Big technique is uniquely Canadian, controversial but effective, designed to get suspects to confess by making them believe they are joining a criminal organization. Now, if you have made it this far and enjoy content like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. On January 27, 2024, Quo, then 42, was arrested in Vancouver and charged with second degree. Sandra Saunders, who had spent 17 years waiting for this moment, posted on Facebook, "Oh my God, you just don't know how I feel." 17 years of phone calls, 3 times a week, and it finally led to a name and a pair of handcuffs. The trial was scheduled to begin in September 2025. RCMP stated there is no evidence Quo is linked to other homicides, but continue to investigate. Crystal's case is part of the broader crisis of missing and harmed Indigenous women across Canada. A mother who called 3 times a week for 17 years. That is what it took. 17 years of phone calls before a name was finally attached to the DNA. But the next case would take even longer, 28 years. And the answer would come only after the person responsible had already passed away. Gracelyn Greenidge. On the night of July 28th into the 29th, 1997, a nursing assistant finished her shift at a seniors' home in Toronto. She had worked there for 18 years without missing a day for anything serious. She never made it to her next shift. When a concerned coworker came to check on her the following day, they looked through the peephole of her apartment door and saw her body on the floor. So who would target a woman described by everyone who knew her as caring, compassionate, and always smiling? And why would it take 28 years and a genetics lab in Texas to find out? Gracelyn Greenidge, née Braithwaite, was 41 years old. She was originally from Barbados and had emigrated to Canada around 1977 with dreams of becoming a registered nurse. She lived at 50 Driftwood Avenue in Toronto's Jane and Finch neighborhood and had worked at Castleview Witchwood Towers, a seniors' home on Christie Street, for 18 years, from 1979 to 1997. Colleagues described her as caring and compassionate, always smiling, always very joyous. She had left Barbados with a dream and spent nearly 2 decades building a life of quiet service. Detective Sergeant Stacy Gallant said she led an exemplary life. There was nothing in Graceland's background that would explain why someone would target her. Graceland was last seen leaving her shift at approximately 11:30 in the evening. When she failed to appear for her next shift, a co-worker visited her apartment and peered through the peephole. Police found evidence of a significant struggle throughout the apartment, blood in multiple locations, and considerable disarray. Her passing was caused by blunt force trauma. There were no signs of forced entry, which suggested she may have known the person or let them in willingly. Witnesses in 1999 reported Graceland had been seen with an unidentified man for several weeks before her passing. He was never identified, but initial forensic testing could not yield usable DNA profiles from the scene. The technology of the late 90s simply was not advanced enough. In 1999, police posted a $100,000 reward. The case went cold for years. The breakthrough began in 2017, when Ontario's Centre of Forensic Sciences developed a DNA profile from a swab taken from a table leg at the crime scene. That profile matched an unknown male already linked to 2 earlier Toronto homicides, Christine Prince in 1982 and Claire Sampson in 1983. 3 cases, 3 women, spread across 15 years, 1 DNA profile, and still no name. The realization that a single person was responsible for all 3 sent a chill through the investigative team. In 2022, Toronto police engaged Othram, a Texas-based forensic science company, to apply investigative genetic genealogy. By 2025, familial relatives of the offender were identified through public genealogy databases. On December 3, 2025, the Center of Forensic Sciences conclusively identified the person responsible. His name was Kenneth Smith, born around 1946 in South Porcupine, Ontario, now part of Timmins. Smith had a long criminal history. He harmed a young girl in 1975, served time, and was paroled in 1981, just 1 year before his first confirmed taking of life. He accumulated weapons convictions and other charges throughout the 80s, though several serious charges were repeatedly withdrawn through plea deals. He lived at 16 to 17 different addresses across Toronto, never staying in one place long, and worked in security administration and furniture sales. He blended into the city. He looked like anyone. His convictions predated Canada's National DNA Data Bank, which was not established until 2000, so he was never biologically profiled during his lifetime. The system that could have caught him simply did not exist when he was most active. Smith passed away in 2019 at the age of 72 in Windsor, Ontario. He never faced a courtroom for any of the 3 lives he took. Police classified him as a serial offender, responsible for 3 separate incidents, all described as crimes of opportunity with no connection between victims. They believe there may be additional victims. On December 11, 2025, Toronto police publicly identified Smith. Deputy Chief Robert Johnson stated, "If he were alive today, the Toronto Police Service would arrest Kenneth Smith. Because Smith is deceased, no charges can ever be filed. But the investigation remains open to identify potential additional victims. Police believe there may be more women whose cases have not yet been connected." 28 years after Graceland finished her last shift at the seniors' home on Christie Street, she finally has a name attached to what happened to her. It came too late for a courtroom, but it did not come too late for the truth. A name found too late for a courtroom, but not too late for the truth. But the next case is one of the most disturbing on this list, because the answer was hiding in the same building the entire time. Myrna Latondra. In October 2006, a woman vanished from a rooming house on Lorne Avenue in Winnipeg's Point Douglas neighborhood. Her sister reported her missing almost immediately and even went to the house to ask questions. She begged police to search the building. They did not. For nearly 7 years, the answer to what happened was buried in the basement of that very same house. So why did no one look? Myrna Lisa Latondra was 36 years old, an Anishinaabe woman from Pinai Mutang First Nation, also known as Fairford in Manitoba's Interlake region. Raised by her grandparents on the reserve, she was described by her cousin, Patty Sinclair, as quiet, kind, thoughtful, and creative, with a soft voice whose smile lit up a room. She was someone people remembered for her gentleness. Myrna suffered chronic pain following a fall from the Slaw-Rebchuk Bridge around 1990, requiring leg braces, spinal screws, and metal plates. She walked with crutches or a cane and was receiving disability payments. Despite her physical limitations, she maintained her independence. She was living in the rooming house on Lorne Avenue at the time of her disappearance. Myrna was last seen on October 5, 2006, near Memorial Boulevard in downtown Winnipeg. The man responsible, Trigo Ekid Andretti, born Dylan Harold Grubb in 1975 in Ontario, had met Myrna just weeks earlier through a free voicemail service used by people looking for work. He contacted her sister Lorna first, who then introduced him to Myrna. It was a chance connection, the kind of introduction that happens every day. According to Andretti's confession, he strangled Latondra from behind, then carried out acts too disturbing to detail here. He dismembered her remains, disposing of some parts and burying others in the basement crawl space of the rooming house. He told people Myrna had gone to British Columbia with someone she met at a bar. It was a simple lie and worked for 7 years. Andretti continued living in the same building for nearly a year after what he had done. In May 2007, he married Jennifer McPherson inside that same house. Myrna's sister Lorna reported her missing in October 2006 and confronted Andretti at the rooming house, noting that her sister's belongings were still there and she would not leave without her things. Lorna knew something was wrong. She asked police to search the building. Police did not act on the request. The family said their reports were not taken seriously. They were told Myrna had probably left on her own, that she would turn up eventually. For nearly 7 years, Myrna's remains lay hidden in the basement while life went on above. People slept, cooked meals, and walked the hallways of a building that held the answer the entire time. In May 2013, after Andretti's wife Jennifer McPherson was found harmed on Hansen Island, British Columbia, her scattered remains discovered on the remote island. Information from BCRCMP led Winnipeg police to finally search the Lorne Avenue house. On May 9, 2013, nearly 7 years after Myrna vanished, her remains were found. The case became the first arrest resulting from Project Devote, Manitoba's RCMP task force for missing and harmed Indigenous women and exploited persons. It was a breakthrough that should have come years earlier. If the house had been searched when Lorna first asked, Myrna would have been found in 2006, not 2013. And Jennifer McPherson might still be alive. Andretti was arrested on May 30, 2014, and charged with second degree. At one hearing, he laughed and smirked in front of the victim's family. On August 25, 2015, he pleaded guilty, stating, "I am sorry, but that seems insufficient for the loss." Justice Chris Martin called the act evil, vile, and grotesque, and said Andretti should be locked up for the rest of his natural life. He was sentenced to life with no parole for 20 years. Running concurrent with his life sentence, 25-year minimum, for the first-degree taking of Jennifer McPherson's life in British Columbia. Andretti targeted Indigenous women in both cases. He was classified at the time as Canada's latest known serial offender. On July 2, 2016, Andretti was found dead in his cell at the Regional Psychiatric Center in Saskatoon. He had bled to death from a deep wound on his arm. No weapon was found. His passing was ruled self-inflicted. Lorna Sinclair later testified at the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, saying, "If we had been listened to, then Jennifer McPherson's life would have been spared." The sister knew. She told the police, and no one searched the house for 7 years. A family that begged for answers and was ignored for years. But the next case has almost no answers at all. Just a woman who left her home on foot one night and was found 22 kilometers away the next morning. Cody Carlisle Rogers. On the morning of February 1, 2022, frontline RCMP officers in Mission, British Columbia, responded to a report of human remains at Cascade Falls Regional Park. The park sits in dense forest at the edge of town, roughly 22 kilometers from the center of Mission. The woman found there had last been seen leaving her home on foot, late at night, just hours earlier. She lived nowhere near the park. There is no transit route that connects the two locations at that hour. So how did she end up there? And who brought her? Cody Carlisle Rogers was 40 years old, a resident of Mission in the Fraser Valley. She lived on Grand Street at 6th Avenue. Limited personal background has been publicly released about Cody, but what is known is that she was last seen alive at approximately 11:30 in the evening on January 31, 2022, leaving her residence on foot. Just under 11 hours later, at 10:43 the next morning, her remains were found at the park. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, known as IHIT, was called in. Detective Corporal Suki Desi made a critical statement early in the investigation. "We do not believe the homicide occurred at the Cascade Falls Regional Park. Her body had been transported there. The manner of her passing has not been publicly disclosed." Police described the incident as isolated and unconnected to Lower Mainland gang activity, and assured the public there was no ongoing risk at the park. Her identity was confirmed and released on February 4th. IHIT partnered with Mission RCMP, the BC Coroner's Service, and the RCMP Integrated Forensic Identification Section. Investigators worked to build a timeline of Cody's movements that night and released her name and photograph to identify potential witnesses. The distance between her home and the park is significant. 22 kilometers is not a short walk. It is a drive. Someone had taken Cody from somewhere between her home and wherever she was going, transported her over 22 kilometers of road, and left her at a regional park in the middle of winter. That requires a vehicle. That requires time. And that means someone may have seen something on the road that night. On the 1-year anniversary, February 1st, 2023, IHIT renewed its public appeal, specifically asking about anyone who may have seen a suspicious vehicle in the area of Cascade Falls Regional Park on the night of January 31st, 2022. That detail is significant. It confirms investigators believe a vehicle was used to move her body to the park. It also means they may have a general description of what they are looking for. Despite this, no witnesses have come forward publicly, and no suspect has been named. The road to Cascade Falls is not heavily trafficked at night. A vehicle heading there in the early hours of February 1st would have stood out. The case remains unsolved. No arrests, no charges, no publicly identified suspects. Cody Rogers left her home on foot one winter night in the Fraser Valley and was found the next morning in a park over 20 kilometers away. The road between Mission and Cascade Falls is dark and winding, especially at night. Someone drove that road with her. Someone knows what happened between 11:30 at night and 10:43 the next morning. IHIT continues to investigate. The tip line remains open. 22 kilometers between her home and where she was found, and still no explanation. But the final case on this list carries the same unanswered weight. A young man found inside his own home, with a 35-hour gap that no one has been able to fill. Adrian Golofit. On the evening of February 12, 2021, a friend arrived at a coach house in the Clayton Heights neighborhood of Surrey, British Columbia, to check on a man he had not heard from in over a day and a half. Adrian had always been responsive. The silence was unusual. When the friend entered, he found him dead inside. There were no witnesses, no obvious motive, and a 35-hour window in which anything could have happened. So what took place in that coach house? And why has no one ever been charged? Adrian Golofit was 31 years old. He lived in a coach house near 194th Street and 66th Avenue in Surrey's Clayton Heights. He attended Kwantlen Park Secondary School and was described by classmates as kind and funny, just an all-round sweet guy. The valedictorian of his graduating class called him a friend to so many of us. He was an avid poker player and soccer fan, the kind of person you would find at a pub on a Saturday afternoon, cheering for his team. Neighbors knew him as polite and quiet. He had lived in the area for less than a year. He was not known to police and had no criminal record or gang connections. His family was completely blindsided. Adrian's last known contact was at approximately 8 in the morning on Thursday, February 11th, 2021, when he spoke to a friend. Roughly 35 hours later, on the evening of Friday, February 12th, at about 7:17 in the evening, that same friend came to check on him and found him dead inside his coach house. The specific cause has never been disclosed, but the media reported that blood splatter experts were among the forensics team working the scene, indicating a scene involving significant bloodshed. IHIT. Sergeant Frank Jiang initially called the case truly a mystery, stating, "Was it random or not random? These are obviously serious questions." IHIT investigators went door to door and requested neighborhood video footage from every home and business in the area. They worked to reconstruct Adrian's activities during the critical 35-hour gap between his last known contact and when he was found. What did he do that Thursday? Did anyone visit him? Did he leave the house at any point? Did a vehicle pull up that no one recognized? Those hours remain a blank. 35 hours is a long time. It is long enough for someone to arrive, do what they did, clean up, and disappear without a trace. On the 1-year anniversary in February 2022, IHIT released a crucial update. The incident had been determined to be targeted and not random. That was a significant shift from the initial mystery characterization. It meant investigators had ruled out a break-in gone wrong or a stranger encounter. Someone chose Adrian. Sergeant David Lee stated that forensic examination was complete. Electronics from the residence had been reviewed, and witnesses had provided accounts of Adrian's activities. He said the information obtained was painting a clearer picture of what may have transpired. Despite this, the motive remains publicly undetermined. Targeted means someone chose Adrian specifically, but no one has said why. The case remains unsolved. No arrests, no charges, no publicly named suspects. Adrian Golofit was 31 years old, had no enemies anyone knew of, no criminal ties, and no history with police. He was found inside his own home after a day and a half of silence. Someone knows what happened in those 35 hours. The targeted determination suggests investigators may have a theory. But so far, nothing has followed publicly. A kind and funny guy, a poker player, a soccer fan, found in his own home with no explanation that has ever been shared with the public. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.